Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Snyder, and if you're watching this, it means that you must have enrolled in one of my classes, so I will be your teacher for this semester. You're welcome to call me Professor Snyder, Dr. Snyder, or just Mark. Get that out of the way. We're probably going to be spending a lot of time getting to know each other, and there's no sense standing on formalities. Apologies for any video quality issues or audio. I'm making this at home, and I'm not a pro at this. So I'll go ahead and admit that right up front. The lighting might not be great, and I never know where to look with these things, where the little camera lens is. As for this video, I'm going to try to keep things pretty casual. I often get asked how I came to be at FSW, what my background, qualifications, etc. are. I guess the main point is, what do I have to offer somebody like you that's trying to get started in computers and trying to learn this material? And so I like to get that out of the way up front. If you've already watched this because you had me in a previous class, there's probably no sense in watching it again. I doubt if it's changed very much. I'm the same person I was last semester. So where to begin? How did I get into computers? Well, it all started back when I was in high school. My parents, computers weren't really a thing. My parents for Christmas got me it was a TRS-80 Model 1 from Radio Shack. It had 4,000 bytes of memory, and it supported the basic programming language, if you know what that is. You could either type your program in from scratch every time you wanted to do something, or you could save it to a cassette tape, which isn't even a thing anymore. I upgraded it after I had it for a little while to 16,000 bytes of memory, and it had upgraded basic language support. So I did that. And once I got that thing, I was hooked on computers. I tell people I knew from that point what I wanted to do with my life, basically. I didn't know what I was supposed to use it for or how I was going to make money with it, but I knew that that's what clicked for me. I think it was mainly the puzzle aspect of programming a computer, trying to take some idea that I had for how to do something and translate that algorithm in my head to the language that the computer could understand, and then seeing the computer be able to do that. I thought that was just the coolest thing, and it was very exciting to me. So next, our high school offered a 2-year vocational program. We housed the vocational site for all of the area high schools, and so I entered it. It was a 2-year program. They called it data processing. So my entire junior and senior years of high school, 3 hours a day, every day, I would walk across the parking lot and go to our school's Votech building and learned programming. So by the time I graduated on a few different computer platforms, I could program in BASIC, Fortran, RPG. Some of these languages are still out there. I don't see Fortran that much anymore. BASIC has fallen by the wayside to a large extent. RPG is still used by a lot of companies, O'Reilly Auto Parts out there. But, back then they were cutting edge, modern languages. So I was just doing this because it was so much fun. But one day I did ask my teacher, so with this education, what am I going to be able to do when I get this, when I go out there in the real world? And he said, oh, well, you'll probably end up being a system analyst. I'm like, well, that doesn't clear things up for me. What the heck is a systems analyst? So I didn't know what that meant. Now I know what it means, and I would probably say the same thing to beginning programming students. So as a programmer, often, in addition to just typing in the software, what we do is we look at systems around us. You might be observing people standing in line at the bank, filling out their deposit slips, handing them to a teller, looking at what the teller does with that. What do they have to record behind the scenes? Handing the person a receipt. And then you repeat that algorithm with the next customer. So what are the things that are repeated? What are the things that are exceptions to that? What are the inputs and outputs? All of that involves analyzing a system. Another example would be where you're at a grocery store and you watch them bring out the green beans and putting them on the shelves. People will take a couple of cans off of the shelf. They create a hole on the shelf. The stockers come by and they look at that hole on the shelf and they push the green beans all to the front so that the next customer can get them. Later, they add more cans to the shelf when it gets empty to fill the holes. And a system analyst will look at the tedious, repetitive parts of that take people to do those jobs, look at where errors can occur. Maybe they accidentally put carrots there instead of green beans. I don't know. You can think of countless examples of this sort of thing. I don't want to belabor the analogy. But as system analysts, we would be looking to automate those things with a computer or some kind of a machine, because a computer does not get tired. It doesn't get bored. It's not going to get careless and make a mistake. And while it's doing that, it can answer questions and provide some data analysis for us. It can report statistics, how many green beans have been purchased in the last 24 hours, that sort of thing. So looking back, that description of what I was going to do when I grew up makes perfect sense. But at the time, I had no idea. So then I got out of high school, went to Central Missouri State University. They had, at the time, a lot of colleges were adding computer science degrees, but it was essentially a math degree, and they had modified it to add programming classes and then call it a computer science degree. So it isn't one of the modern computer science bachelor's degrees that you might see today that's a little bit more robust. It was just basically a lot of math. So I continued adding more advanced topics to my repertoire and a lot of math along the way. Interesting side note is I have not had a science class since my 9th grade physical science. When I came through the system, as I said, they were just getting these degrees started, and they typically would consider the computer class, a programming class, as a science. So at every opportunity, I would substitute in my schedule all of my electives, math or computer science classes, for my science elective. So I have never had a biology class, chemistry, geology, etc. I was so hungry to just learn more about computers, it felt right. But now I think back and think, well, it would kind of be nice sometimes to understand a little bit about biology or chemistry. So don't do what I did. So I got the bachelor's degree, and then I went to one of the job fairs. You'll see those, at colleges. They offer these job fairs where employers come in and they want to check out the people that are about to graduate. And TWA, the airline that was based in Kansas City, they hired a whole bunch of my graduating class. Out of like 16 of us, they probably hired 10 of us. So we all went to Kansas City to the airport and we worked on airline software. It was very good experience for me as a junior software developer, not just in getting experience at programming, but owning a design. They gave us the opportunity to rewrite the car reservation system in their software. And so 4 of us that all just graduated from college sat there and wrote on whiteboards and figured out how we wanted this to work, what the algorithms were going to be, what the customer-facing user interface was going to look like, how we should store the data. It was very exciting. We might not have made some of the mistakes we made if we had done something like that before, but it was a lot of fun. I got to know those folks very well and had a blast. So I loved working at TWA. They eventually merged with Northwest Airlines, then made a deal with Delta, and then later went out of business, and TWA no longer exists. The flight benefits were awesome too. So I got to fly places for free on TWA and Northwest Airlines as a recent college graduate. So that was a lot of fun too. But I had bigger goals than just hanging around there. So as I think about moving on in my career, I think back to those folks that I graduated with that also went to TWA and compare my career with theirs. A couple of individuals, one was named Darren, one was named Rhea. They were fellow students at Warrensburg at CMSU. We went to the same team and worked on the same projects to start our career for the first 4 or 5 years. Darren stayed there his whole career. He stayed at that same company working on the same software his entire career and is retired now. I think about that a lot. He never really wanted to use the flight benefits. He didn't like to fly. He went on one trip and didn't like it, so he turned around and came home. I often ask, well, why work at an airline where you know you're going to not get paid a premium because they know one of the parts of their salary is the flight benefits. He just enjoyed the company and didn't have any ambition to want to go look around. I was completely different. I wanted to go see what was out there in the world. Rhea was similar. She used that as the basis of her career, started a family, left for a while to raise her children, came back part-time, left again. She just kind of came and went as she needed the money. It was a good example of how different people start out with the same experience, but for different reasons, and use that to reach goals in their life. So I would suggest that to you, is that learn what you can, add to your skills, but you don't have to do what everybody else does. Figure out what your goals are, make the decisions that help you reach them, but, make friends and help each other along the way. And, my hope is that will lead you to some kind of job satisfaction when you look back, when you've been in the industry as long as I have, and you don't have too many regrets. Well, so as I'm leaving TWA, I moved down to Dallas in Texas and started working for American Airlines. Similar work. I learned a couple of different languages. They had something they called Saber Talk. It was a language that looks like the C language, but when you compile it, it compiles back to plain old assembler language, which is what most of the reservation systems run on, or did at the time. So they were designing a brand new system for car and hotel reservations, and they had a partnership going with Budget and Marriott, the car rental and hotel chains. It was very innovative. Some of the stuff that they were doing was taking advantage of new hardware, new big mainframe systems at the time. So, it was nifty. It would have been a cool system. And I was involved in, they gave me a team of people, and we were supposed to be building the system that bridged data between their online and offline systems. The online part was used for the reservations. The offline part was used for back-end reporting and accounting and all that. And the two systems needed to talk together very well for it all to work. So after several years at that project, the accountant stepped in and said, whoa, the cost to finish the system from where you are right now is going to be higher than the actual value that the system's going to be providing. So it's not going to be cost effective. Later in my career, I came across a woman that had done her master's thesis in college on what not to do in large software companies, large software projects. And one of the examples she used, she called it one of the largest software projects ever to fail, costing in the hundreds of millions of dollars to its companies and partners, was this project that I was working on. And the reason that was listed by people was the complexity of getting the online and the offline systems to talk to each other, which kind of annoyed me because that was my part of the project and it all worked. So that was not the reason why it failed. It was mostly political. I guess the biggest lesson I would draw from that, without getting too much further into it, is writing documentation about how a system is supposed to work isn't going to magically come to life one night and become the system. Somebody actually has to sit down and program it, but they had more documentation people on that project than they had programmers, so they could write documentation faster than we could write the code behind it. Anyway, long story short, I left there and went to another team at American Airlines. And the great thing about that for me was that I got to learn Windows and C++ from this other project. It was a program that we were writing that was going to run on a CD that we would give to travel agents that would let them chart available hotel rooms on a map. Now that's done everywhere today, of course. Every website that you go to where you can book travel has the ability to show you where the hotels are in relation to each other. But at the time, that didn't exist, and we were doing it for the first time, and I got to do a whole bunch of really cool, innovative stuff there. Of course, then they canceled that project too before it shipped, and I left American Airlines with the dubious honor of having not a single line of my code that I wrote in those 5 years ever make it to production to see a customer. But it was fun. I learned a lot. So one of the things that I got to do while I was building that system was I got to go to a developers conference up in Redmond, Washington at Microsoft's location. They were promoting some of their new technologies, and they invited developers up there to attend the conference. and it was really cool. So it was a good opportunity. I met a whole bunch of stuff, did some networking. It was pretty nifty. So I guess my point is those kind of opportunities come along sometimes. Take advantage of them. Now they have conferences like VS Live, similar things. I could list several of them, but I won't. But if you get a chance to go to those things, take advantage of it because, you'll add a little bit about the skills that you're using at work to them, and that's the justification that lets the company pay for you to go. But the networking opportunities, just seeing what is out there and what other companies are doing to innovate and sparking that imagination in you, those are really good opportunities. So I would recommend that. So I got disenchanted with American Airlines and I left and did a little bit of consulting in the Dallas area still. It was good money. But the good thing about the contracting job that I took was I could leave it at the office at the end of the day. And sometimes between companies, you kind of need a rebound job and a palate cleanser to let you forget all of the bad things about the company you just left. So that was good. But at that point, something really cool happened. I got an offer to go work for Microsoft in Redmond. They interviewed me for this project called, you can look it up, it's called Microsoft Bob. It's an entertaining story. It was one of the few products that they processed more returns of the software than they sold of the software. I don't know how that works, but it was, I guess, a little bit comic for the, I won't get too much into it. You can read about it. But one of the neat things about it is this is where things like Clippy came from. If you've seen the little clip, paperclip assistant in Office, they did have some little technologies that spun off from the creativity about trying to be a little bit more assistive to the users and give them interactive help along the way. Some of those ideas got sparked by that project. But I also got interviewed by a team that was creating a travel-related app. When they saw what was on my resume and how the work experience I had, they said, oh, yeah, we got this other team you should talk to. And that's who eventually made me the offer. So that worked out really well for me that I didn't get stuck on the Microsoft Bob team. So at the time, a little context, back then, there were things called bulletin boards that were popular. This was before the internet existed. So what people would do was they would install a little piece of hardware called a modem in their computer. They would plug their phone into it. If you've ever seen War Games with Matthew Broderick in it, that's what he's doing, is he's using a modem. So they would connect to another person's computer, and the modem on their computer would answer the call, and the two would have a connection, and then they could share files back and forth. So that's how bulletin boards worked. And what you would do is you'd have a crib sheet of a whole bunch of phone numbers, and you would have your phone, your modem, call the other modem, and you'd see, oh, do they have any new files that this other site didn't have? And you would upload and download files, and that's how people would network and share files at the time. It was, it worked, but it was not very efficient. It was where I think people got the notion of computer people being geeky and backroom type stuff, and the idea of hackers, because if somebody found a game program and they uploaded it to their bulletin board, you could sort of share copies of software that way. So that became really popular. But it was all before the internet came along and replaced it. So at the time, AOL and CompuServe were big companies that would give you free CDs at the grocery store, and you would take them home and install their software, and that software would allow you to connect to AOL's or CompuServe's bulletin board computers, and you could see what files and other programs that they had available, and then they would start building software that you could use. And one of those, so Microsoft wanted to get into that game, so Microsoft created the Microsoft Network, MSN, and a suite of helpful consumer applications. They were examples of that would be things like buying cars. They had a program called CarPoint, mapping. They had Expedia Streets and Trips, or just, I think it was just Streets and Trips back then because Expedia didn't exist yet. But lots of different helpful little applications. And that's what our team was supposed to do, is build the travel app They had the idea that you could connect to the Microsoft network and then book your travel, hotels, flights, etc., on this little app connected to Microsoft's bulletin board system. So about that time, the bulletin board stuff morphed into being the internet. That whole thing happened. And we were told, well, instead of shipping your CD or your software on the CD that we give away for free, what we're going to do is you're going to instead create a website. And it's like, well, everybody rushed to go figure out what the heck a website was. And that eventually came to be called Expedia, Expedia.com. One interesting thing about that was while I was at Microsoft working on the code that would become Expedia, I was calling code that I had written while I was at TWA. And so that was kind of interesting. So I was sitting there in a pretty good place, working for Microsoft, one of the first commercial website projects, travel industry related. I was very familiar with it. So I got a chance to write some of the very first web testing tools. And one of them was even published as part of the Internet Information Systems Toolkit back then. That was a book and a CD that included a bunch of helpful utilities that Microsoft published. So my tools, they included a thing called a proxy. So a proxy sits in between, let's say, your web browser and the website that you're talking to, and it would sit in between and record the conversation that goes back and forth. Then later you could take that script and you could play it against the web server very quickly. You could do it on a bunch of threads on a bunch of different computers and use that to stress test the web server. So it was a very nifty tool for us. Our standards at Microsoft were that before you could release a new version of your software, you had to stress it and demonstrate it that could live under load for 72 hours. So my tool would let us show that we could stand that level of stress. I also wrote a web crawler, which is what it's a tool that opens a page that you tell it to start with. So I could say start with Expedia.com, and then open all the links on that page and open all the links on those pages and so on until it discovers the whole site or crawls the whole site. You could do things like limit the depth. You could tell it to only stay in these domain names. That was pretty cool. One of the things we were pretty proud of with our online travel guide is that we had like over 60,000 pages of travel information. It was like a Zagat guide, but online. And every time we had a release where the editors who would go out there and change the content, my crawler would find all the broken links to the pages that had been changed and were linking to the old pages that had been renamed or didn't exist anymore. It was just, a bunch of typos, whatever. But it was very cool stuff, very useful. I was there basically in that team while we did the 1.0 through 3.0 versions of Expedia while it was still owned by Microsoft. And that was very fun stuff. But while I'm sitting there one day browsing the want ads, if you will, I noticed that there was an opportunity to apply for a job to work on a 3D space game. So Microsoft back then didn't really create its own games. What they would do is they would work with game creators and Microsoft would publish them. They would become the publisher for those game developers. So they would take it over. They would help with a lot of the testing, the advertising, the packaging. Because one of Microsoft's big strengths was their distribution system. They were very good at delivering lots and lots of copies of software to people around the world whenever they had a new release coming out. So they would provide those services for a percentage to the game developers. So I'm thinking, wow, a chance to go work on a 3D space game. I was really liking the travel stuff, but how do you say no to that kind of an opportunity? So the cool thing about this game, too, was the VP of Microsoft Research, his name was Rick Rashid, he had this notion that Microsoft should be able to build its own games. As he's building his career and going through his life as a developer, he created this version of the game Trek. I don't know if you've ever seen it or heard of it, but it's a text-based game where you could have this little grid of a sector, and your ship would be represented by a couple of little characters like a big V or something. And you could jump to another sector and you could fire torpedoes at the little asterisks at the Klingon ships, etc. It was all text-based, but it was fun. And he wrote a version of this that would work on the Alta computer that he was trying to get to know. And then as new systems came along, he would use that, he would port that game to those new systems as a way to play with those and learn the new technologies or new programming languages and stuff. So he thought, hey, this would be interesting. Let's explore taking this and creating a Windows version of Trek and see if we could ship it. So he was building a team to work on it, which is how I got this opportunity. Well, that quickly morphed way out of control into being a 3D game using Microsoft's DirectX technology. Our code name was going to be Oblivion initially, and it eventually got made and we shipped it in the year 2000, and it was called Microsoft Allegiant. It ended up being referred to as a massively multiplayer squad-based space combat simulator with resource management aspects. It was a very fun game. I enjoy playing it, and that was the neat thing. When you're working on a game and you also enjoy playing that kind of game, it's a lot of fun. It's actually still played. You can go to the freeallegiance.org website, and that says something right there that over 20 years later, there's still a following that likes playing this game. One of the things that I got to do there, another one of these opportunities that you get by working on this kind of a job, there's this game conference every year called E3. In 98, 99, when I was working on this game, the 98 one was in Atlanta, the 99 one was in Los Angeles. So lots of game companies competing for attentions. You know, they had all the t-shirts and swag that they're giving away at these things. Just standing there amongst all of these game companies, you know, plying their wares with all the lights and the noise. It was a blast. And also then getting to be a presenter at the Microsoft booth at a conference like that, presenting our own game. That was pretty cool. So very exciting time, and I enjoyed it. But at that point, after we shipped that game, I was tired. I needed a break. So I left Microsoft, moved to Southwest Missouri. That's where my family's from. And I started a cattle farm. My parents looked at me like I was nuts. You know, we send you to school, buy you books, and then you give it all up and start farming cattle. What's wrong? What did we do wrong? But it involved a lot of physical work and was a nice change to all the more cerebral career stuff that I had been doing. And sometimes that's refreshing. I had a chance to get involved with my local church, got certified to be a volunteer firefighter during that period of time, you know, first responder stuff. That turned into, I had an opportunity talking to one of the other firefighters. I ended up getting a job teaching computer classes at a school called OTC, Ozarks Technical College. It's in Springfield, Missouri, the southwest part of the state. So that was my start to teaching. But I guess the big point I want to make about all this is that if you look at statistics, most people with college degrees will have 2 to 3 completely different careers throughout their life. So I would say, even though you think something is your focus and where you've got a lot of investment in time and energy and money, don't be afraid to try something completely different. Yes, there are different people like my friend Darren that chose to do the same thing at the same company in the same city their whole career. And that's perfectly fine too. Like I said, figure out what your goals are and use this college education as a tool to help you get there. Don't come to feel like you're locked into your circumstances, especially with all the resources available today. You can be doing something totally different in a very short period of time. So I would encourage you to just don't put your blinders on, keep your eyes open on the periphery for other things that you think might be interesting, even if it's just for a chapter of your life. Okay, so teaching doesn't pay a lot. And the most direct way to get to where you can earn more money is to have a higher degree. So at this point, I've only got a bachelor's degree. So I'm at the low end of the pay totem pole. So I got the job there because of my work experience. But once I was there, that sort of gave me the spark and the motivation to go back and take some graduate level classes. That was pretty awesome too. One of the cool things was being around students again, who were at this point much younger than me, seeing all the creativity, all the passion, And it kind of reminded me of what I was excited about when I got into programming. I got into the master's program there, and then eventually, by getting my master's degree, I was accepted into the doctoral program, which is another little insight there. If you go to a school and you get a master's degree there, it's a lot easier to get into their doctoral program. It's not guaranteed, but if they gave you the master's degree and then they tell you you can't get in the doctoral program, well, what are they saying there? So another thing I'll say too about these advanced degrees, I know a lot of people, like Elon Musk has recently got some attention by downplaying the value of higher degrees. I've also come across otherwise very smart, very talented managers that say they don't see the value of a higher degree. Even the point of saying they would prefer to hire people without bachelor's degrees or master's degrees or PhDs. This is ignorant, and in the textbook definition of the word ignorant, in my opinion, it just means they don't know what they don't know about people who have these degrees. If you don't have the degree, you're less likely to know what it took to get one and what is included in that, what is of value in that. So as a brief aside, not to knock my colleagues in other disciplines, when I talk about other disciplines, I talk about the hard sciences versus things that aren't in hard science degrees. I will concede to Elon that getting a degree in, say, humanities education or what I might call a fad degree has given education a bad reputation and has caused lots of problems, in my opinion. Others will disagree, and that's fine. But a master's degree in a hard science program, it shows something. It demonstrates that you're capable of working in a developing field under an advisor's supervision on a topic that they feel would be significant to explore in that field. You getting your master's degree, you may contribute in some way to furthering what we know about that topic. And others may come along later and build on what you contributed. You have to be smart. You're solving problems that nobody has solved yet, as opposed to some of these classes where, how many times can you write a bubble sort, right? You're in the lower level bachelor's degree, associate degree classes, you're often solving problems that have already been solved many times, but you need to learn how to solve them. You need to learn those techniques and add them to your arsenal. But when you get into these advanced graduate degrees, you're solving problems that nobody else has cracked yet. You didn't pick the problem, and you're not necessarily directing the experiments. You have to come up with a thesis stating a problem and what your contribution is going to be to its solution. And that thesis is a culmination of this effort. Same thing when you go on to get a PhD, that means you're going out on your own. You are picking your own sliver of the open problems out there in the problem space. You are designing your own experiments. You're making your own conclusions and convincing others that your efforts are significant. Getting a PhD shows that you're the next level up, that you're able to recognize open problems in the world that need to be solved. You're able to gather and bring all the available tools and knowledge to bear on those problems and make significant strides towards a solution in that space. So how is that invaluable, as the detractors of this would claim? There are people that are going to try to do just the bare minimum, sure, to get a piece of paper. There are lots of people that get master's degrees that don't take the thesis route, which to me, that was the fun part, getting to solve a problem nobody else has ever solved. That's the fun part for me. And, people doing the bare minimum is just a given in all areas of life. But you can't just dismiss everyone with a master's or everyone with a PhD as being a waste unless you really don't know what it takes to get that and what those people have to offer. Okay, rant over with. We'll move on. Okay, so teaching was a great job too, and I learned a lot by doing it. I got to get my skills back to being current in a wide range of languages across a bunch of technologies. VB.NET was there at the time, C#, reinforced my skills in C++, and I got into the web development side of things and got to teach a number of web development, database related classes and stuff. It was just a good get current on what the state of the art is across all these technologies. But then 2008 comes along, and a friend of mine told me about a job nearby where they work. It was the insurance industry. It wasn't glitzy. I got the job, and after working there a year, they promoted me to be the head of all the developers and architects at that. It was a small company. I enjoyed that. The leadership experience was great. I feel like I helped move their platform forward, made some improvements while I was there, hired a bunch of people, and really beefed up the brain trust of their development team. The combination of the education, programming, becoming tired of the farm work, all of that together, I started getting the itch to go out and do something exciting. So I'm sitting out there playing with my cows, and in the meantime, Microsoft had taken Expedia and split it off onto its own company in the early 2000s. It had kind of languished. I mean, it was a decent site. It did what it did to let people book their travel. There's nothing wrong with it. But it sort of languished out there, not a lot of innovation, not a lot of investment. They eventually got bought by one of these corporate raider types, and he wanted to invest in media companies and thought, well, maybe Expedia would be a good thing to put in the basket with all these other companies I'm acquiring. So one of my friends from back when I was at Microsoft working on the travel application, he had stayed at Expedia through all of this ins and outs that they had done in the industry all that time. He said, hey, we've got this part of Expedia called the Expedia Rewards Program, and it's been sitting there and needs a bunch of work. We'd really like to just scrap it and come up with a whole new Expedia Rewards Program. And so he offered me a job to come back up to Washington State and help him do that. Awesome. Great. So I get to sell the cows. I get to go back to the big city, and my wife was very happy about that. And so just to try to make that story relevant, I'll point something else out here. And whatever career you choose, think ahead to where the companies are that hire those people. If you want to work in the space industry, you're probably going to have to go to the towns where the spaceports are. If you want to work in the health field, you're probably going to have to at least be open to moving where the hospitals are, that sort of thing, at least for that chapter of your life anyway. It's hard to leave friends and family. We've had to do that several times in our life, but it's just a chapter, and you keep contact with these strong friendships that you've made, and obviously you keep track of your family as you go. But, just keep that in mind. Think ahead. Don't be surprised when you graduate that, whoa, wait, the only place I can go get a job in this field is 3 states away and I have to leave everything. I can't do that. Just keep that in the back of your mind. So anyway, I get back up to Expedia, and I realized that I recognized a lot of the code that was the same code that when I left over a decade before. Some of the code that I had written there was still being used. Not a lot of innovation had happened. So I wrote a lot of new software while I was at Expedia this time, architected a new global trip insurance platform. We wrote that in Java. We took over the cruise reservation line of business, and we wrote a new platform in Java to replace the old one. Then I got fired. So I'll take a little bit aside. I didn't get fired for not doing a good job there. People get fired for lots of reasons. Sometimes they do something bad, judgment error, they make a mistake, maybe they cost the company a bunch of money. Sometimes a business decides, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. We don't need people with this skill. We need more people with that skill. And sometimes it's political. In my case, it was political. The guy that I worked for was great, supported everything that I did. We had a great set of colleagues and teams that helped do all this new software. It was awesome. But he left. And while we were doing all of this new innovative stuff, we were pretty aggressive. When we wanted to do something, we wanted to make improvements. It's just like, well, we don't want to go through all these hoops. Let's just go straight to making the improvements. And you can step on some toes, and some people politically hold grudges when you're operating like that. So when my boss decided, hey, he was going to go to London and take a new role, my team got moved under one of those such guys. So within a few months, he started calling in all of those chips and decided he was going to manage me out and put one of his buddies in my place. And so that was that. I remember that being very painful, but just keep in mind in your career, even if you feel like you're working hard, performing at a high level, making the company lots of money, it can all change in the blink of an eye. Don't take it personally. Just pick up your toys and move on. Hopefully you have continued to keep yourself marketable, kept up with your skills, and that will lead you to something better down the road. Now, granted, I have a lot of faith that I'm going to be where I'm meant to be in my life. And I look back after a 40-year career in this industry, I have never changed jobs when it didn't work out better financially, in 3, 6, 9 months in the end, looking back. It didn't feel comfortable at the time, stressful, a lot of change, a lot of turmoil. But just do you. Stay marketable, flexible, and be honorable, and things will work out, is I guess my message. Even if it doesn't work out to your advantage, wouldn't you still want to be the kind of person that doesn't let it change who you are, even if that kind of stuff is going to happen to you? So I guess, the general thing there is don't sweat the small stuff, and pretty much it's all small stuff. After that, I worked at a couple of different places, but one of them was a really cool job at a company called Level 11. They called themselves Level 11 Consulting, because other companies can only go up to 10, but when we really wanted to crank it up, we could go up to 11, that sort of thing. The company's motto was they wanted to come into a project. They wanted to pick out the hardest problems that were outstanding and solve them for a whole bunch of money. So the situation that I got in was that some people who had worked at Disney had worked on this project to create the Magic Band, which is a cool little thing that you wear while you're walking around the park. The sensors that they've installed all around the parking lots, the rides, everywhere, they can locate you where your device is, and it allows Disney while you're in the park to track you wherever you are. You can also use it for stuff like opening your hotel room door. You can use it to pay, all kinds of stuff. A bunch of the executives at Disney, though, left and went to Carnival Corporation, and they wanted to do the same thing once they got there and picked the Princess Cruise Line, which is owned by Carnival, and they wanted to take all the Princess Cruise Line ships and put the equivalent of the Magic Band on there. So they enlisted Level 11 to help. And I got assigned the navigation and mapping part of that. So I wrote the database, Java services that managed where everyone was at on the ship, computed the routes from one place to another when you wanted to go somewhere. Another cool use case was it let waiters find you. You could go to the bar and order your drink and then just walk away. And the waiter would, when your drink's ready, they would bring it to you and find you. Parents could find their lost kids. They could keep track of, why isn't my kid at the pool where they said they were going to go? All kinds of cool stuff. It was a really fun project. If you ever get a chance to go on a Princess Cruise and you get the medallion class where you get the little wearable thing, please let me know how that works for you. I'd like to see how they're using it in the time since I have left there. One fun thing I did was I got to stay at work one night and I wrote the route to text algorithm. So what it would do is it would compute your route, let's say from your cabin to the pool, and it would convert that to text directions like, walk aft 20 steps, turn right, get on the elevator, go down 3 decks, go forward 30 steps, through the doors and arrive at the pool, that sort of thing. Like with the E3 opportunity before, this job gave me the opportunity to go to CES, which was in Las Vegas that year, and our software was demoed in the Carnival booth. They had a huge space that they'd reserved and made it look sort of like parts of a cruise ship with a casino area and a restaurant area and this and that. And people would walk around, they'd let the press carry around one of these wearable devices and watch themselves being tracked on the screens above. So that was a lot of fun. It was a good experience too. After that project was over, I had been dropping the hint and dropping my resume with people that I knew at Microsoft that whole time since I got back to Washington State. And at some point, I got a chance to go back to Microsoft. So Microsoft has been my dream company, so it was awesome to get a chance to go back there again. This time I joined the Windows team, and I worked on a few different things there. One of the first projects that I was on was Windows IoT, the Internet of Things, which is basically the version of Windows that runs on the little Raspberry Pis, the little microcontrollers. So they would put those in refrigerators, or if you go to some fast food restaurants and you walk up and you say, well, I'd like a cherry Coke Diet Go, and it pours your drink for you. The earlier versions of that dispenser were based on microcontrollers running Windows IoT inside. There's a lot of other little kiosks and things in department stores and stuff around that still use it. Anyway, so I was working on the Windows IoT. And one of the cool things that led to was I got to work on this internal project called the Kegignizer. So one of the teams at Microsoft had gotten one of those, you can get them at, I think, Home Depot and places, but they're like an apartment refrigerator with wheels and a keg inside, and has a beer tap coming out the top. And so anytime you want to, you just walk up there and you can get a cold beer. Well, one of the VPs was walking through the department and saw it and said, dude, you can't have those here. We have interns that are underage. They're not old enough to drink. So you got to lock that thing in the closet. So it worked great. It was a good morale enhancer for teams. They loved dragging that thing out for morale events. So our director, he came up to us and he said, hey, you guys are the IO team. Why don't you do something that can allow us to keep using this thing without locking it in the closet all the time? So we strapped a Raspberry Pi on it. We added a badge reader, an electric on-off valve, a flow meter, weight and temperature sensors, the whole works, just everything we could think of. We stuck the thing out on the floor, and so after work, we could have a little get-together, and people could stop by and scan their badge, and it would serve them no more than, let's say, 16 ounces per hour of whatever the keg was loaded up with at the time. We would send data up to the Azure cloud services, and it would keep us informed of what the temperature, the fill level, the consumption rates, how much was being used. Very cool, fun project, but we were getting paid to do that on work time, so that was pretty nice. Okay, after that, I got to move to a team where I was working on Windows services, like user mode services, they would call them. And one of the things that I got to do was work on the Windows Task Scheduler. They had traditionally had a whole bunch of bugs in there related to daylight savings time. Every time daylight savings would change one way or the other, where they get a whole bunch of bug reports saying, hey, Windows is broken, it didn't run my task, or it ran my task twice this month, or ran it at the wrong time, just all kinds of problems with it. So there are a lot of other services in Windows that use the parts of Task Scheduler, and a lot of edge cases here, so it was kind of tricky, which is the reason why it didn't work. It's a little harder than you might think, surprisingly, to get something like that to work. So many people had touched this over the years, but in my time there with working with it, I think I finally got everything working, and I haven't heard any problems with it since there. Okay, so why am I not still at Microsoft? Well, during this time, I'm getting a little longer in the tooth. I wanted to move to Florida. When COVID hit up in Seattle, I had the chance to work remotely, but I got laid off right before moving our stuff here. Microsoft had a good severance package, and it was not a big deal. And by the time that ran out, I got the job here at FSW, so it all came together. I got to move to Florida, got to start teaching again, and Microsoft paid me to make the transition. It was all great. So ever since I got my PhD, I sort of hoped I would get a job back in the education field. So again, everything fit together, and I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. So you might look at somebody with experience at a company that interviewed you, or perhaps where you got hired, that has a long history in this industry, and feel a little bit intimidated. Don't. As an experienced programmer, and as somebody who's been a hiring manager at several of these companies that I worked at, I always valued new team members joining my team. And I'll tell you why. So you can focus on those things and hopefully make the most of if you get that opportunity. First of all, you bring a fresh set of eyes, new perspective. These could be old problems, but you bring a new perspective to it. A couple of analogies. So my dad always told me that before I open or close a gate on the farm, make sure I know why that gate was closed or open to start with. There's usually a reason why the status is quo, so to speak. Second, I'm sure you have seen the videos of the guard dog that day after day has paced back and forth barking at the mailman to the point where one day somebody left the gate open, but the dog is in such a habit that it continues just to pace back and forth, not realizing it can actually reach the mailman through the open gate. But it's a slave to its habits and can't assimilate the new status. So I would say, don't go into a new job like a bull in a china shop. You're going to do like I did and make enemies of people, step on toes, and you might need some of those folks as an ally later. When I started at Microsoft also, a VP came in the first week and he told us, I order you to do something your first 2 at works. He said, if you see something you don't think is working correctly, if you see something wrong, you have full license to speak up about it, because experience has shown that if it are about 2 weeks or so, you start accepting the way everything is done and you become part of the problem there. So I'd say most companies value change as part of their culture if they're doing things correctly. Just do it tactically or tactfully. Don't make people mad. Don't irritate people. Another reason you shouldn't feel intimidated. Your coworkers are going to be experts at what they've been working on. They're ahead of you. They've got a lead on you, okay? But they don't have the time or energy to learn new versions of things and the newer technologies that perpetually come out. They may be much more of an expert at what is currently there, but they don't know the new stuff any better than you do. So on the flip side of this, as you get experience and you see new junior people to you coming along, don't forget to continue to invest in your own growth so that you don't get stale. I've seen developers go heads down on a project that may be a very important project for a couple of years. Then they say, okay, we're done with this project. Hallelujah. We have a big ship party. We celebrate. And then they realize that they haven't paid attention and their skills are no longer marketable, and they can't find a new team that wants them, and they get laid off. So my recommendation to new people is to wait till some new technology comes out or some new version of what the team has been using gets released. Then use your energy to dig in, and most new software comes with a what's new. Dig in and learn about it, and if you get an opportunity, suggest how maybe those new features could be used on the project. And what you'll quickly find is that people start seeing you as a resource and start coming to you on that topic. So teams are made up of people that have a variety of skills and interests, and you just want to establish a niche for yourself and show yourself to be valuable there. And then on the other hand, like I said, continue doing that as time goes on so that you don't get stale and somebody comes along and supplants you over time. One of the things about me is some of the other stuff that I've gathered along the way through all of these other official work experience. I got involved in umpiring on the side. It's mostly high school level baseball, varsity, junior varsity, that sort of thing. But even that, it gave me an opportunity to develop this mobile application for Android, iOS, Windows Phone, and for the web that allows umpires to log in and give feedback on each other after a game. So, you have 2 umpires that go out and work a game, and afterwards they would go back to the parking lot and they would get a prompt on their phone and it would say, hey, I see you just finished your game at this field. Click here to open the form to give feedback on your partner. And, it does, all the normal stuff, asking regular umpire type questions. But then we funneled all that data up through the cloud to our training staff. We used it at the end of the season to do promotions, all kinds of fun stuff. But I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity if I wasn't paying attention and doing extracurricular things for my job. And I've always said, computers are nifty in and of themselves, but they really aren't that valuable just sitting there with a programmer sitting in front of them. But if you combine them with some other, and this is one of the reasons why I feel disappointed in myself that I never learned, any of the other sciences. Because if you combine somebody that has the ability to automate things with a computer, a system analyst, with a problem space that needs somebody like that, then you can be incredibly valuable. So keep your eyes open, your radar out for other things that need to be done in the community. And you'll always be coming across somebody that says, hey, I've got this little company, but I need a website, or My wife has done several websites for like car sales companies or little t-shirt companies and a museum or two. But just keeping your eyes out and networking with other people, you'll come across these fun projects, and those are all nifty things to put on your resume and add those skills to your tool belt to help you get where you belong in this career. One of the things that drew me to Florida was a boating community here. I had a sailboat up in Seattle. It was an older 39-foot Beneteau cruiser, and I loved it. I loved sailing up there. So we had to sell that when we moved from Seattle to Florida, and I just recently got another sailboat, this time a newer Jeanneau, about the same size. And I'm hoping to get out there and cruise around. But I love tinkering with the computer stuff and, all the little devices on there too. It'd be awesome to be able to cruise to the Bahamas one of these days and, sit out there and play on the beach from my own boat. So that's one of my personal interests too. So here I sit, long in the tooth software developer. I've done a bunch of stuff that I thought was pretty cool at the time, but now I'm this old guy. I realize most of the stuff that I've done will eventually be forgotten and irrelevant. I get that. I'll be the guy at the end of the bar saying, oh, yeah, you should hear about the cool project that I worked on once. Okay, one of the aspects of the software industry is that this isn't like the people that built the pyramids. What we're building here is all just code. It lasts for a while, then someone comes along and they hit the delete key and it's gone. No matter how innovative it is, someone can select it, copy, paste it, make changes, and now it's theirs. It kind of makes you focus on the more important aspects of your career than leaving behind some kind of a lasting legacy or believing that something like that is going to be the result. I feel good when I look back and realize I tried hard not to squander all the opportunities that I got in my career. My software filled a need at the time and hopefully improved people's lives through using the software. Maybe it made their work a little bit easier, less repetitive, less mundane. I'm sure you've heard the caution not to screw people on your way up the ladder because they're the same ones that you're going to meet on the way back down the ladder. It's better to treat people well and make friends you can look in the eye later and know that you treated them honorably. So remember this, most of my jobs have come because of somebody I knew, not something I knew. Be nice to people. Help other people when you can, and they'll be happy to help you when they can. I really envy those of you that are just getting started in this industry that I love and I have so much passion for and have spent so much of my life investing in. There are so many interesting problems still out there left to solve, and I hope you can enjoy and take satisfaction in being able to push forward the boundaries of human knowledge too. I hope we have a good semester, and I hope we can be there, that I can be there to help you reach your goals like so many people helped me along the way and helped me reach my goals over the years. And with that, I think I will cut this off. Thanks.